So the media frenzy about the billionaire race to suborbital space is dying down, and appropriately so, since the race to suborbital flight was well over half a century ago after all. And even though, as I pointed out in my videos, at least the one about Virgin Galactic, there is some practical value to what's being done here, there is a much more important race going on. So although I am clearly biased, I'm going to call this race for Sir Richard simply because he did reach what NASA regards as suborbital flight beyond the Kármán line, at least what NASA calls the Kármán line, and none of this would have happened without his influence after all. So if we want to call him an astronaut and everybody else who was aboard this ship, that's fine by me, and there was a scientific experiment that was carried out on the very same flight, which also I think sets this mission apart from what Blue Origin did. But when it comes down to it, it's essentially the same thing. But let's get on to what's really important. And this is, of course, what China has been doing on Mars and the Moon. Their progress thus far has been nothing less than astonishing. As you can see, the Chinese orbiter Tianwen-1 entered into orbit sometime about 5 months ago, and that was in itself an incredible accomplishment, even if their rover had not successfully set down on the red planet. But it did. On the very first try, China has successfully landed a probe and rover on the surface of the red planet with a full suite of scientific equipment, primarily oriented towards setting up a human presence. The most important of that, in my opinion, is the subsurface penetrating radar, which will detect water ice up to 100 meters beneath the surface of the planet. And I must admit, these accomplishments make me both excited and a little bit sad, because the Viking lander, which set down in precisely the same area, the Utopia Planitia, if it had a probe that could have dug down just a few more centimeters, it is estimated that it would have found water ice way back in 1976, and all of the ramifications that would have gone with it nearly a half century ago. But regardless of that, these new accomplishments on the part of the People's Republic of China have not gone unnoticed on the part of Bill Nelson. As a matter of fact, he regards China as being not only a worthy competitor, but actually a threat. And yet, his plans for getting to Mars are substantially less ambitious, and that makes very little sense to me. Why is China setting such an aggressive timetable? Is there something that they might gain out of getting to Mars first? And even though Elon Musk has an extremely aggressive timetable, is there a way that China might beat SpaceX to the red planet as well? We're gonna find out all of that in just a moment. Good morning, and welcome to yet another episode of the Angry Astronaut. Just plowing these things out as rapidly as I possibly can, just because there's so much to talk about. And yeah, In addition to that, I have a bit of an announcement to make. My most recent episode kind of suggesting that maybe, Jeff Bezos, well, actually, I said definitely Jeff Bezos should not have gone to space until he got his house in order, given all of the issues that Blue Origin is causing for ULA and, by proxy, the U.S. military and all of that. I got a number of responses saying that I may have stepped over the line, that I may be just a little too hard on Jeff. So I just want to let all of you know that I have turned over a new leaf. Yes, this channel is going to be taking a different direction. There's going to be a lot more positivity. There's going to be a lot more forgiveness, because after all, these are the sorts of things, especially when it comes to forgiveness, that have been embraced by every culture on the planet as being a very, very noble trait to have. And really, I just haven't been demonstrating it at all since I started this channel. So it's time to take things in a different direction. And I've got my Boeing mug here, Starliner, because Starliner is going to be taking flight. And I have every confidence that they're going to make it, even though they're over a year and a half late with this unmanned flight. I have every confidence that we are going to have two vehicles now instead of one to go to the ISS, thanks to the Boeing Corporation and their legacy, their more than half-century legacy of creating amazing spacecraft. And I've got this Blue Origin mug as well, in order to also demonstrate that, there's just no hard feelings. I mean, come on. I mean, look what just happened. They sent a rocket up and it made it past the Kármán line and it came back down. Full 100% reusability. There aren't very many companies doing that right now. I mean, that is just awesome. Come on, really awesome. I mean, never mind the fact that, Richard Branson, who has less than 5% of the net worth that Jeff Bezos has, did the same thing. And also, he's sent a number of satellites into orbit for the U.S. military and other clients through Virgin Orbit. He's been able to accomplish all of this with a whole lot less personal wealth. But enough of that. Making these kinds of comparisons, it just drags down. It doesn't build up. So, the Angry Astronaut is taking a new step. I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to call it. The positive astronaut, the uplifting astronaut, Oh, okay. I can't do this anymore. It's obviously just kidding here, guys. Screw Boeing, screw Blue Origin. As soon as I hit 90,000 subscribers, I am stacking these two things on top of each other, and it's going to be my first two-stage rocket attempt, and I will make as noble of an attempt to reach orbit as Blue Origin did. In other words, no effort at all. Okay. Enough about all of this suborbital race that's been consuming the media lately, because really, when it comes down to it, even though I think there's some merit to some of what's being done right now, it's irrelevant compared to the big stuff that's going on. Right? All you guys, most of you have one of these shirts. Mars and space, interplanetary space, cislunar space in general, low Earth orbit, etc., and the competition that is ongoing. And what has me especially angry right now, angry as hell, is the fact that the People's Republic of China have set a more aggressive date to send a manned mission to Mars than NASA has. NASA is talking the late 2030s, whereas the Chinese are talking 2033. How is this possible with over a half-century head start? How in the name of hell can the Chinese even be thinking about beating NASA to Mars? But you know what? It might just happen. Now, of course, there's SpaceX out there in the mix as well, and I know it's not Elon's plan to be going to Mars that late in the day, but at the same time, there are certain advantages that the People's Republic of China has over SpaceX that could theoretically give them the opportunity to establish a permanent base on Mars before SpaceX can. How is this even remotely possible? Well, I'm going to tell you all about what the Communist Chinese have been up to and how that stacks up against the efforts of the Western world right now. So on April 29th, as most of us know, to a great deal of fanfare, the People's Republic of China launched the first segment of their new space station, the most ambitious project that they have undertaken in low Earth orbit. And they did it with an expendable rocket, a rocket that, as a matter of fact, captured a lot more media attention than the space station itself did, as various parts of it rained down, including on areas that weren't inhabited, but very well could have been. In rapid succession, the Chinese sent up a resupply vessel and a manned vessel as well, with 3 taikonauts, bringing the total number of astronauts in low Earth orbit, if you include the brief flight of VSS Unity, to a total of 13. Very impressive and a world record. At the same time, the Chinese have placed a couple of lunar probes on the surface of the moon, including rovers looking for lunar ice, and also a sample return mission that had to carry out its mission very quickly because it relied on solar energy and would have died the moment that the moon passed beneath the Earth's shadow and out of the sun's influence. And yet they pulled that one off too, on the first try. However, all of these remarkable accomplishments have been achieved with expendable, expensive rockets. But thus far, that has not prevented the People's Republic of China from taking the lead when it comes to lunar exploration and to the dominance of low Earth orbit. The ISS is admittedly aging, and even though the Russians intend to add a long overdue lab to the structure, they are at the same time talking about abandoning it entirely. The ISS very shortly is going to see its last days, and we don't really have a manageable replacement. We have Axiom Space and we have Sierra Nevada, neither of which is getting substantial support from the American government, and this is simply unacceptable. And we're only talking about low Earth orbit. The People's Republic of China also has extremely ambitious goals when it comes to the moon, as we all know. Far more ambitious, really, at least in terms of what they've actually accomplished, than what the United States and its allies have been able to accomplish thus far. 2 landers have set foot on the surface of the moon, far more ambitious than anything we've sent there, and anything that's been associated with NASA, such as Peregrine, has experienced delay after delay. What was really astonishing was the fact that the Chinese were able to do a sample return from the lunar surface and get that sample back to Earth before solar power ran out. We're only talking a few days worth of operation here, and they got it accomplished, and they got their samples back to Earth on schedule. We have never done anything along those lines. So the fact of the matter is, China is ahead when we're talking about establishing a permanent presence on the moon. The big question is, why the hell do they really want to do this? They're investing a lot of time, a lot of expertise, and a lot of money in accomplishing this. Well, those answers can come in a variety of different forms. And you know what? I think NASA Administrator Bill Edwards can explain this better than I can.
The Chinese government is the only second nation to successfully land on Mars. They are getting ready and have already publicly announced that they want to send 3 big landers to the South Pole of the moon. And that's where the water is. And we are still a year or two away from a much smaller lander going there. What I'm now getting to is, what about landing humans on Mars, and why this is important to the subject matter that we just discussed about Artemis. This is what has been in public reports, that the Chinese government and the space program officials from China are studying the possibility of conducting a flyby and a lunar lander in the decade of the 2020s. I think that's now adding a new element as to whether or not we want to get serious and get a lot of activity going in landing humans back on the surface of the moon. Thank you for letting me add that.
So yeah, that definitely sounds like a sense of urgency. However, Mr. Nelson has also stated that it is not NASA's intention to attempt a manned mission to Mars until the late 2030s. And primarily the reason behind this rather plodding pace is the SLS. After all, if you're spending $1 to $2 billion a launch, it's going to be difficult to establish a permanent manned presence on the moon, let alone on Mars. And I think the late 2030s is a little optimistic, really, given the amount of expense that it's going to take to go from the moon to Mars initiative, which I fully support, but I don't support it with this rocket system. Yes, it is the most viable rocket to get human beings to the moon as rapidly as possible, but as I've said before, this is the best and only solution that we have for the next few years, an interim solution that should be replaced by something different, and a cargo version is absolutely insane. An SLS to transport astronauts for the next few years until we come up with something better. And interestingly enough, that's precisely what the Chinese have in mind as well. And as before, I am not going to show you the Chinese version of their Starship as they depicted it recently a few months ago, simply because it's a carbon copy of this animation. As a matter of fact, it's a substandard copy, and also I'd probably end up getting a copyright strike on it. But regardless, the whole idea is identical, right down to the animated images. The concept of a fully reusable vessel that can travel from point to point on the Earth's surface with large numbers of passengers, Shanghai to New York in 90 minutes and all that sort of thing, but really this is a thinly veiled effort on their part to demonstrate that they intend to do exactly what SpaceX intends to do: transport large numbers of people from Earth to the Red Planet for an affordable price with a fully reusable vessel. Some of this stuff, frankly, is kind of embarrassing. Some of these images are so obviously copied, like this one right here. This one is a complete carbon copy. It's just a little embarrassing. I would think they should be a little ashamed of themselves. They've got very good CGI in China. They could do something better than this, but regardless, what it means is the Chinese intend to duplicate what SpaceX intends to do, and to do it in a less amount of time. This may seem impossible because Elon has such a huge head start, but there are a number of factors that give the Chinese a key advantage. The first of these is environmental concerns and the FAA. SpaceX most probably will be hobbled by these considerations as they continue to experiment with Starship, especially if we're talking about orbital launches. The Chinese, on the other hand, could give a damn. As a matter of fact, they've demonstrated a great willingness to send parts of their descending rockets that haven't gone exactly right directly into residential neighborhoods without so much as a buy or leave. So really, environmental concerns and indeed human safety concerns are probably not going to be something that's going to hold up China significantly when it comes to development of Starship. And it goes further than that. There's also a matter of funding. Even though Elon Musk has a hell of a lot of money at his disposal, he alone cannot compare to the amount of money at the disposal of the entire People's Republic of China, or at least the money they have at their disposal to put into a manned mission to Mars. And no, this isn't some CGI creation. This is a mock-up of a Mars base built in the Gobi Desert, and it's used for a wide variety of purposes, primarily to determine how well human beings can survive in highly isolated areas, very dry areas, very cold areas, by the way. The Gobi Desert is not a hot desert, and simply how well they're going to be able to adapt to a very, very difficult situation on an alien world. And there are great advantages to doing this. Mining the asteroid belt, as I have brought up many times, would be far easier to accomplish from a delta V standpoint anyway from Mars than it would be for human beings to exploit the moon from Earth. And this is just a matter of gravity and nothing else. If you don't have to escape a full G of Earth gravity, you can exploit nearby asteroids a lot easier. And there is a lot of wealth out there. Wealth that the Chinese, of all people, are very aware of. Tantalum, for example, which is used to make capacitors in electronic equipment such as mobile phones and DVD players, video game systems, computers, and then also we have iridium, which is well known for its high reflectivity and extreme resistance to heat, and on top of that, you have a metal that needs virtually no introduction, and that's platinum, a metal that's used not only in technological components and computer systems, but also in vital medical equipment. Without platinum, our civilization would be in a world of hurt. And guess who controls the vast majority of platinum resources? China, unless you count South Africa, but what they have is extremely extremely hard to get at, and given the political situation in South Africa right now, it's little wonder that these items might become even more inaccessible in the future. So China could move from being the dominant power when it comes to these rare metals to the undisputed power if they are able to exploit the asteroid belt from Mars. Little wonder then that so many tourists are paying a visit to this future Martian base, this mock-up, because after all, a lot of national pride is at stake. China is on the verge of going from superpower to universal superpower, and it's all because they're about to seize control of space from low Earth orbit all the way to Mars. NASA is not doing enough, and the big question remains, will SpaceX be able to handle it all by themselves? Only time will tell. Now, as always, I would like to make one thing perfectly clear. I actually applaud the People's Republic of China for being so aggressive with their goals here. I mean, this is actually quite remarkable what they're trying to achieve and what they've already achieved. You know, their ability to land on the moon with such precision, their ability to do a sample return mission on such a short timetable, and to be able to do that successfully, to land on Mars on their first try with such a high degree of success. Really, I mean, we don't know all the details, but as near as we can tell, everything on this rover has been functioning perfectly. And if we're looking at who's going to be dominating the 21st century, mining the asteroid belt would provide a limitless amount of resources when it comes to these rare metals, amongst many other things. And given the ambition that they have as far as this is concerned, and given this nation's track record, I just strongly doubt that their ambitions are purely peaceful and scientific in nature. I think that there's more to it, and I think that we dare not take them lightly. And I do believe that the race is on, and shooting for the late 2030s is shooting for failure. And SpaceX, as you saw in the video, might have a very difficult time doing this on their own. They need support. They need the support not only from the US, but from the rest of the Western world. And the sooner we realize that, the better. If you like what I have to talk about, if it's alarmist as it might sound sometimes, but once again, I think it's just foolish to ignore these possibilities. And once again, I stress that they are possibilities, not certainties, but ones that we should at least consider. If you like considering all of this stuff with me, there are many ways to support me on this channel, all in the description, and it covers things like what I've done recently, the trips that I took to cover Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit, and all the stuff that I did at the Cape, including some very unique stuff like a flyover of the old shuttle landing strip. I got to do that, couldn't believe it. They allowed this helicopter into their airspace to do this flyover at only about 150 meters. It was unbelievably cool, and what's really cool is the Sierra Nevada Dream Chaser is going to be using this exact same airfield. If you want to see stuff like that, some exclusive content, you know how to support me, and it's all on my Discord channel. So until we start taking China's ambitions seriously, and once again, the People's Republic of China, their government, not their people, but their government, and until we start taking all of that seriously and start establishing more ambitious goals for the human race to travel not only to the moon, but also to the red planet and the wealth that lies out there for the taking, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.